discuss Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. Now, in this act, it is talking about how the wrongs that were created by apartheid are being changed. Now, particularly, wealth was formulated only, or it was created to assist, to help only whites. So now, in this act, since it was developed to ensure that wealth, it is spread amongst all the race of the country, particularly black people.
There, now it's fair for everyone.
So it ensures that the economy of black people, they can access that economy. They can do things, they can participate to ensure that the economy of the country grows. Now, the consequences were restricted wealth creation and imposed under the development of black communities. The purposes of BEE, Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, we are going to discuss 4 facts. Now, the first fact, it says it enables wealth to be spread more broadly across all the population groups. Now, it means it's not going to categorize only on the minority, only on the whites, but the wealth is going to be spread amongst all the population groups of the country. That will be our first point. And then our second point, it outlines the areas that would give the government a platform to ensure that this wealth, it is spread. So it gives a platform to companies to ensure that please concentrate on management, please concentrate on ownership, please concentrate on, it gives a platform, it clearly give a guidance to the companies on how to spread this wealth.
As long as you share the wealth.
Now, the third point, it allows for the development of good practices, the code of good practices that is supposed to be conducted by the companies. It gives that platform. And then the fourth point, that will be our last point, it aims at targeting on the inequalities that was created by the government. They target those inequalities so that they redress in terms of the economy of the country. So those are the purposes that we will talk about. Now, there is a difference between that we're supposed to talk about. Firstly, in 2003, when this act was implemented, it was called Black Economic Empowerment. So now, along the way, when things unfold, then the government decided to draft the new act that we call Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment. Why this act was implemented? Because it was only focusing on blacks only. It was still restricting. It was still doing the means of the apartheid, because it focused only on blacks. So now, when BEE was implemented, BEE was including every category. All those previously disadvantaged individuals, they were getting an opportunity to be involved in the economic growth of the country. We are going to talk about the 3 differences of BEE and Broad-Based. It's still one act, but there were changes that were implemented that we need to focus on.
It's just not the same. It's not the same.
Firstly, when it was BEE, it is a policy. BEE, it is a policy. Now, the policy, it is not enforced by law. You decide whether, in terms of policy, whether you want to adhere to that policy or you don't want to adhere. But in terms of broad now, it is an act. Broad, it's an act. Act is supposed to be enforced by a company. If you don't do according to, therefore you are conducting non-compliance.
Now, this is the law.
We have to do it. You are bound by law. There will be consequences if you don't do a broad-based black economic empowerment. Then our second point, black economic empowerment, it was focusing on the few previously blacks, only blacks. It was still focusing on blacks, And then on broad is focusing on all those previously. You remember we've talked about the previously disadvantaged individual. Previously disadvantaged individual, we are talking about blacks, we are talking about women, we are talking about people from rural areas, we are talking about disabled people, those they fall. So now the broad focuses on all those, whereas the Black Economic Empowerment Act focuses on only blacks. That's why it was still regarded as it is still discriminating. Our last point, in terms of BE was having 3 pillars, whereas in terms of broad-based Black economic, it has 5 pillars. We are going to discuss now the 5 pillars that we have of broad-based Black economic empowerment.
Launch the pillars.
We've got an acronym that we use to remember these pillars. First pillar that we have, we call it management and control. The other pillar that we have, ownership. The other pillar that we have, skill development. Please don't mix this skill development with that first act that we've talked about. Skill development, there's a difference between the two. And then the other pillar, fourth pillar that we are going to discuss, it is enterprise and supplier development. The last pillar that we'll be talking about is socio-economic development. Now, the acronym that we use to remember these pillars, it is MOSES.
Moses.
M stands for management and control, and then O stands for ownership, and then S stands for skill development, and then E stands for enterprise and supplier development, and then S stands for social economic development. That's how we remember those pillars. Now we are going to talk about management and control. What do we mean when we say management and control? The business must ensure that there is transformation that is implemented in all levels. In the previous government, you were not going to be given an opportunity, being a black, to be a manager. You were not. So now the businesses are forced by this law to transform, to make sure that in all levels, there is a previous disadvantage. They are involved in terms of management. They have to appoint black people in senior position. They have to involve black people in decision making. And then they need to ensure that blacks, female, are represented in management. That is how you have to explain management. Ownership, it is a responsibility of the business to ensure that black people, they own. How are they going to do that? By selling shares to this or giving shares.
It's stock. 1 million shares.
To black people, a partnership, franchising, they need to do that. Therefore, these black people, they're going to have an opportunity now to own something. And then the other point, they need to encourage black investors to invest in big companies through shares, through whatever. And then large businesses, they should form a joint venture with small businesses. Give those small businesses an opportunity to grow. I've said we need not to confuse the Skill Development Act with the Skill Development. Skill Development Act, it focuses on the people that you've employed in working environment. You as an employer, you need to ensure that you provide skill to your workers. The difference here, skill development, the business need to engage everyone. Every community, they need to come up with a system on how to train, how to educate, give the skill to everyone. Whereas in skill development, the business focuses only on the employees. That's the difference. We need to engage black people in skill development initiatives. Maybe they could educate the community, come up with systems of giving leaderships, whatever. The business will decide on which way they want to educate the community. And then the other point is that they need to provide learning programs to black employees, to black people. And then the business, they need to pay 1% on their payroll to ensure that there is skill development programs in their enterprise. The other pillar that we are going to talk about, it is enterprise and supplier development. You see, it says enterprise and supplier development. It is the responsibility of the big companies to do what? To develop the small companies, to ensure that these small companies, they are assisted so that they have an opportunity to do what? To grow. The first point that we're going to discuss, they need to outsource the service suppliers that the BE, it is compliant. The business are encouraged to invest to these small businesses, to uplift the small. They are forced by law to ensure that they assist the small business, give those small businesses an opportunity to what? To grow.
For small business interests, didn't you?
And then the businesses, the bigger businesses, they are forced by this law to give skills to those small businesses. They ensure that those small businesses, they are given an opportunity to be upskilled so that they got an opportunity to grow bigger. The last pillar that we'll be talking about, that is social responsibility or socio-economic development. Now, when you talk about socio-economic development, this should focus critically areas where the community, they need to be assisted. It's the responsibility of the business to decide how are they going to plow back to this community, how are they going to assist in that community. The business will decide, our community is very poor, they've got a poverty thing, rather let us give them a food parcel. Or our community, it's uneducated, let us give them leadership programs, or let us train them so that they got an ability to do their own entrepreneurial qualities. They got the ability to create or to start to establish their own companies. So that will be the decision of the business on how they can plow back to this economy. Those are the socio-economics. Okay, we are finished about the pillars. Therefore, now we are going to talk about the impact of broad-based Black economic empowerment. Remember, guys, everything is got its good things and bad things. So now we are going to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of broad Black-based economic empowerment. Now, let us start with the positive first. The first point, it says it encourages businesses to address the demand or to redress equity directly. And then our second point, it says it provides variety of business code to improve employment equity. Like variety of business codes, guys, they're going to come with systems on how they are going to alleviate unemployment in this community. They ensure that how are they going to improve the employment in terms of that community. It provides for human resource, the development through training, and now in other words, human resource, they are given an opportunity on how they are going to employ people. What is it that they need to look at when they want to employ? Through what? Through training. They do that, they conduct that through training. Advantages or the negative impacts of broad-based Black economic empowerment.
Negative, negative, negative.
Now, the first fact that we are going to discuss, the business could experience financial implication, financial burden to comply. Now, in other words, they are going to have extra costs when they want to uplift. Maybe, for example, they decide on the enterprise and supply development, they want to uplift that small businesses. It's an extra cash that the business should. Now, it will be a financial strain to a business. And then the second point, it may lead to corruption or nepotism if it is not monitored.
Nepotism is for the weak.
Remember, the businesses, they need to conduct that help to help that community. Now, the business is going to issue out money. Now, there might be a corruption if it is not monitored. If they give that money to someone else, one would like to assist the uncle, my uncle. Let me assist my uncle so that the business it grows. You understand?
Nepotism.
So it may lead to, if it is not properly monitored, it may lead to corruption.
Corruption.
The last point that we are going to talk about, the processes and the procedures may be costly for the business. There is too much legalities that they need to be followed. There are too much administration costs that are involved in implementing a broad-based Black economic empowerment. Now, those were the impact of broad-based economic empowerment, the advantages and disadvantages. Therefore, now we need to start with how do you discriminate, the discrimination action regarding broad-based Black economic empowerment. How do you discriminate in terms of this act? We are also going to discuss the facts. Failing to implement affirmative action to meet BEE responsibility, therefore you are conducting non-compliance. You remember who Employment Equity Act? We spoke about this policy, affirmative action. Affirmative action, when you employ, you need to start with what? With those previously disadvantaged. You need to focus on that a category of those, so it's still the same as BEE. Now, our second point in discrimination action in terms of broad-based Black economic empowerment, when you are promoting unsuitable people who management position, you know exactly this one doesn't have the qualification, this one doesn't have an experience, therefore you promote that individual, then you are conducting non-compliance. And the third point, when you are refusing to award tenders to Black suppliers, therefore you are conducting non-compliance. You are discrimination in terms of broad-based Black economic empowerment. Let us discuss the penalties. If you've conducted non-compliance, what will be the consequences? We call that the penalties of a broad-based Black economic point. Therefore, we are going to discuss 5 points in this fact. The first point, the business may face imprisonment for non-complying or for fronting practices. Fronting, it's when the business, they put someone who's not qualified just for public view. That is fronting. And then the second point, the penalties could be fined to the business.
You'll be getting your fine for non-compliance.
Who conduct in non-compliant. Penalties can be imposed to a business. And then the third point, the government will cancel any contract that is awarded to that particular business because they do what? They've got false information regarding a BEE status. And then the fourth point, business can be banned from participating in government contracts.
Banned!
If you are an enterprise that is seen that you don't comply with this act, therefore you can be banned from participating in government contracts. And that can take a period of 10 years.
Businesses that do not comply with BBBE may receive a compliance order from the Labour Court, which forces the business to comply with BBBE.
And then our last point.
Approved BBBE compliant vendors will withdraw their contracts with non-compliance businesses.
Now, the ways in which business can comply.
I will comply.
If you want to do right in terms of broad-based Black economic empowerment, what is it that the business must do? Therefore, we're also going to discuss 5 points. Now, the first point, the business must appoint Black people in management position. You see? And then the second point, the business must sell shares to their employees or to the public, to people. And then the third point, the business need to send Black people for the skill development training. And then the fourth point, the business need to outsource their service to BEE compliant suppliers. And then the last point, the business need to implement affirmative action. You remember that policy that focuses on previously disadvantaged individual, therefore the business need to adhere to that. They need to implement that affirmative action when they are appointing people. People, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It was nice having business with you.